Welcome back to our channel. I want to thank you for watching. For those of you who follow this channel, I appreciate your time as always. It is important that we dive into Africa's geopolitical engagement in the global community. In the past century, Africa was perceived as a continent that refused to take its responsibility to participate into international discourse. But at the moment, the continent of Africa has realized its importance. With over 28% of the United Nations voting rights, the continent of Africa has a huge voice, not just in the global south, but to shape international decisions. Africa is an important continent, but the governments have to wake up. It's no doubt and no surprise why African countries are being pushed left and right. We see what's happening in the countries across the Sahel region, the formation of the Alliance of the Sahelian state. These countries have experienced incredible colonialism period for centuries, and they have decided that this particular approach does not serve them and their own people. The enormous challenges around the world has made these countries to metamorphosize, to become something else, that they are being perceived by the global community just from the outside. But they have no idea what these countries, Guinea, Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, Chad, have gone through with regards to their colonial power. It is fundamental to understand the history of this region before we start making comments with regards to why we see these nations behaving in this way. African countries have come under incredible attack from their geopolitical partners who previously were criticizing them that they are not taking positions in global issues. Now that the continent started taking positions and making it clear where it stands, it is important to understand that there are a number of reasons why these countries are making these strategic decisions. A lot is at stake. The world is changing. The geopolitical environment has changed from North America, in Asia, and we look at different conflicts around the world. Africa is no different. And when the continent of African governments and countries and citizens who are actually demanding a change in terms of their daily activities and life, it is perceived globally as being arrogant or going away from democratic norms. There are a number of democratic countries in the continent of Africa, but other countries do have pressing issues where they don't consider democracy at the moment to solve those problems. I think Africa's geopolitical partners are disconnected from the realities. They fail to look at the perspective. With the current Secretary of State of the United States, Marco Rubio, coming out and always saying that the global and the United States of America's foreign policy will be based on US's interest. Again, I wonder how this is going to work. How did that work in Germany? And lash out the European Union. We saw that during the Biden administration. The United States behavior in the country of Niger. How Niger was instructed and was told on what to do, who to partner with, who to work alongside. I think this is the biggest problem in geopolitical engagement in the global community. Africa is tired of this condescending, paternalism, and instructive way of engaging in relationship. And we are very surprised in the global community on why African countries react the way they do. It's not surprising. Germany has proven that it would not tolerate, it would not entertain any interference in several areas. And what made you feel that Africans, governments or nationals would tolerate that from you? We've seen how France, the French government's African policy has been that of devastation over the past couple of months. It is important to understand where the African countries are coming from. They have enormous strategic engagement. They want partners that can work with them alongside for a win-win situation. Irrespective of how you put it, these countries will continue to evolve, and they are making their position, which is very unpopular. At the moment, the regional organization of the Economic Community of West African States known as ECOWAS is a dying horse. The glory days of ECOWAS are gone. This organization is still to rediscover itself. Why? ECOWAS was not built for the modern challenges. The evolvement, the world has changed. There is just too much about what has happened that ECOWAS failed to pick up. ECOWAS is dealing with members who have a long-standing ties with a colonial nation that have extended roots around the world. The financial institutions have a veto power, so to point out, at the United Nations Security Council, and is very connected financially. And you think that these countries, Niger, Burkina Faso, Mali, that to an extent do business with France. If you look at the geopolitical map in terms of business development and growth, these countries fall at the lower end of France's particular engagement in terms of trade. The cost of uranium from Guinea is not the same as the cost of uranium that's coming from other countries, from Kazakhstan or from Canada or other countries. This is to tell you the hypocrisy with regards to trade. It is important to note that the current transition in the United States of America has proven to the continent of Africa that the decisions that they have been making all over the past couple of years was the right things to do, because geopolitical partners put themselves first and ignore their other partners' own interest. The condescending behavior that we see from Africa's geopolitical partners is not surprise. That's the reason why the president of Eritrea once said that in today's global engagement, it's all about complementarity, support, engagement, win-win partnership. That there is no room for a paternalistic approach in today. We see how Germany has pushed. We saw how Guinean leader pushed away this particular idea of that a few people should be controlling how people should live their lives. A political system that is not inclusive, it's not a representation of the people. Pretty clear. It is important to know that Africa as a continent at the moment has started making decisions that are not popular, whether they are working with the Russians, the Chinese, the French powers across the European Union, Asian partners, Washington itself. The United States invested over $100 million US at a drone base in the city of Aljazeera. How did that go? It is important for the US to understand that Africa, the former United States of American ambassador, Greenfield at the United Nations, came out in the last couple of months in her administration or during her tenure and said the United States has not paid attention on any global issues in terms of conflict in the continent of Africa. Let me put it this way, that any conflict in the continent of Africa is at the lower end of US priority. This is a wake-up call for the continent of Africa, especially the African Union, to know that the world is not coming to save you. The conflict in the Congo between Rwanda and the country of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, in Sudan, the conflicts in the Cameroons. It is important for the continent of Africa to look at the African Charter, what it said, that every country should stay within its boundaries during independence, what you got during the independent period. Some countries are practicing neocolonialism. It is important to understand why these countries are moving so fast and shaping their political environment. There are thousands and millions of students graduating from African universities on a daily basis. And you want to understand that why there is a huge shift in terms of the economic nation. I always hear this thing, Africa is growing, Africa is building, Africa is developing. But how is it developing in terms of its strategic partners, where the continent of Africa, in terms of their strategic partnership in business, development, and growth, borrow money on huge percentage, as Kenyan president once said, and their rating agencies like Standard & Poor's at some point will move ahead and with unresearchable data rate these countries across the region, which will put them at a struggling point in terms of the economic partnership, where it scares investors to invest money in those countries. All of this have been talked about. And the current geopolitical environment does not represent the continent of Africa. A number of Western leaders have come up and said the institutions, all these Bretton Woods and multilateral institutions, were formed. Even the French president said it before a number of countries in the continent became even countries on their own. And their decisions that were made were not in their best interest. And we are surprised why these countries are rebelling, why they want something new, why they want partnership that can benefit them. I think it's a hypocrisy in terms of the global community. Why would you believe that a country like Guinea that have infrastructural challenges, that really want to move ahead to redevelop and re-strategize and move economic ladder, will be making some choices and then it's questioned? It is important that over the years, if it was 20, 30 years ago, according to one American's geopolitical analyst, the events that happened in Guinea would have been crushed by France. But again, because nothing happened, it's to tell you the world has evolved. Africa has moved. It is vital to understand that at this particular moment, talking about the United Nations, that a lot of events are being discussed that pertaining to the continent of Africa, and the continent of Africa have no veto power there. During the Joe Biden administration, this was floated out there. But again, with the Trump's presidency, this has been put under the carpet. This is vital. And that's the reason why African countries are looking for people and countries that can work with them. China is an example. Irrespective of what you think about the country of China, China has demonstrated to an extent that they are ready for business. It is important. African people need roads, airport, lights, dams, stadiums, a lot of this huge infrastructure. And China has said, I'm going to provide this for you. And they are doing that. How many United States of America or European infrastructural projects, massive projects at the scale of China, that are in the continent of Africa? The figures don't lie. Europe has its own importance in terms of their economic funding projects in the continent of Africa, but that is not at the scale at which the visible development that China has brought in the region. Why is this relevant? It is relevant because recently, until the end of his presidency, the President Joe Biden had to go to the continent of Africa to look at the Lobito corridor, an important route where minerals to an extent will be brought from the hinterlands to the port city of the Lobito. This is vital. However, I think this was going to be the largest United States single-funded project in the continent of Africa. But guess what? This is dead. Nobody's talking about Lobito. But I want to say this. If Lobito Corridors project is not delivered during current President Trump's term of office, I want to say this. African countries are really zooming into this project. If the United States of America cannot demonstrate it can fund a project of the Lobito scale, putting it at the level as China or other geopolitical partner, it will be catastrophic in terms of U.S. engagement in the corner of Africa. And I strongly still believe, from the geopolitical lens, that Joe Biden intentionally went to Zambia, to Angola actually, and Zambia, meeting with the Democratic Republic of the Congo leaders to visit this place, is to showcase that the United States to an extent can still engage Africa. But if that particular gesture was as a result of U.S. trying to flex its wings in the continent of Africa, not as a real project, it will be proven in the next 4 years. The continent of Africa has emerged and is asking questions. That's the reason why there are moves in the Sahel. We see countries like Egypt coming under enormous pressure. The cutting of aid is not new. African governments should have been prepared for this. According to Mario, one of Africa's leading economies that have worked in Goldman Sachs and around the world. Mayo came out over decades ago and said aid has failed the continent of Africa, and she was not wrong. She clearly said it that at this particular moment, what if the aid will be cut in the continent of Africa? We've seen how countries are screaming. Again, it is the United States of America's own money, but to an extent, the US uses this as a tool. We've seen that with AGOA, the US has picked up fights with South Africa and Egypt and a number of other countries in the continent who are bracing for the United States of America's next 4 years. African governments should wake up. The writing is on the wall. Nobody needs to tell you that the world is not waiting for you. The sense of nationalism and protectionism at the moment has skyrocketed and is at the top of the roof. It is important for the continent of Africa to choose its battles. However, sovereignty is not negotiable, because if the partnership does not work or has not been working for the past 20, 30 years, it's not going to work now. That's why the president of Chad came out clear and reminded France that the colonial relationship and contracts do not reflect the current challenges that Chad is facing. That's why Chad moved a little bit closer to the country of China. This is our critical times. If the war in Ukraine did not shake up the continent of Africa, looking at the United Nations being pushed around, asking African countries to choose positions, to take particular roles, African countries refused. And what happened? They were slammed with suggestions, and countries were being punished. The Malayan-Russian Act that almost passed the US Congress was a big problem. African governments have come to the realization that it is about time to start making these choices. Why is this important? The pandemic should have taught the continent of Africa a lesson to know that it is about your time to take some steps that will make you become more relevant. You can be relevant only on natural resources. You must be relevant on other strategic issues. The current cutting of aid to the continent of Africa is an example of what is to come. If, for example, African countries figure out a way, it might be a big opportunity for the continent of Africa now. This particular moment, it could be a vital time for the continent of Africa to take advantage of a way to navigate this aid issue. If you can survive this, engaging other partners to have what the US was giving you, I think you will call the shot with regards to the United States bluff in the future. It is important that Africa wakes up. These are critical times. Here at the Explorer, we talk about the geopolitical engagement on how the continent interacts with North America, Washington, Canada, Europe, Brussels, China, Beijing, Russia, Moscow, Riyadh, across the Middle East and emerging Turkey. Africa, it is about time you start looking at the African Continental Free Trade Area, as that could be the game changer. Let African continent not be a continent where they just talk and no action. The coming of the current president, United States of America, Mr. Donald Trump, should be a relief for the continent of Africa. It's a big opportunity for Africa to shape its future, because these moments are coming just once in a while in historical formation. I want to thank you for watching. Help us grow this platform. Let us know what you think with regards to the current shift in the continent of Africa. Egypt under pressure, South Africa under pressure, the war currently going on in Sudan, looking at what's going on in the Congo, in the Cameroons, across the region in the continent of Africa, Ukraine, considering Cuba. Marco Rubio wants to put Cuba back into the list, and what's happening in the South China Sea. It is vital that geopolitics will influence the food you eat on your table. If you are a country that ignores the global events, look at what's happening in Gaza between the Palestinians and the Israelis. A lot is going on at the moment. It is vital that Africa, not talking about Syria, the continent should refocus itself. The recent meeting by the African Union should be followed up. And at the moment, the continent should know that geopolitical partners are eating each other, and it's an opportunity for them to figure out who to work with and work with those partners that are of their own best interest. I want to thank you for watching. Let me know in the comment section what should be done at this particular time in Africa's history. The wind of change in geopolitics is here, and Africa can emerge from this particular period and re-strategize itself. It is vital that African countries work very closely. Africa needs partners, not just any partner at this critical time in its history. I will be looking forward to meeting you soon in our next episode. Smash the like button, share the video, and watch other informative content with regards to Africa's geopolitical engagement with its partners around the world. For now, thank you for watching The Explorer. I'll be looking forward to meeting you soon in our next episode. Have a good day. Bye-bye.